Good afternoon. The Subcommittee on Emerging Threats and Capabilities meets today to receive testimony on the Department of Defense's third offset strategy. In 2014, Undersecretary Kendall provided this subcommittee with a classified briefing on U.S. technological superiority, and in November of that year, then Secretary of Defense Hagel announced the start of what he referred to as, quote, a game-changing third offset strategy, end quote. Since this announcement, many senior leaders in the Department of Defense, including Secretary and Deputy Secretary, have spoken at length about our military's eroding technological edge and the significance of the third offset strategy. However, these discussions tend to broadly focus on abstract ideas and the general importance of innovation. The purpose of today's hearing is to explore the concrete details beneath the notional concepts. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today about what activities make up the third offset strategy and the extent to which it represents a change from past practice. Appearing before the subcommittee today, we have Dr. Roper, Director of the Strategic Capabilities Office, Dr. Prabhakar, Director of the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, and Secretary Stephen Welby, the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Research and Engineering. I'd like to welcome and thank you all for being here today, and I would turn to my ranking member for any opening comments he would like to make.
Madam Chairman, thank you. I simply am a big fan of what these folks do. I think we need to support the President's request and then double it. That's my opening statement.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. And we will now turn to our witnesses. Your full statements will be made part of the record, and I would ask that you provide us with some brief opening comments, after which we will proceed to 7-minute rounds in our questioning. Secretary Welby.
Chairman Fisher, Ranking Member Nelson, members of the committee, Senator Heinrich, thank you, and I'm pleased to have the opportunity to provide testimony on the technological underpinnings of the Department of Defense's third offset strategy, and to join my colleagues from DARPA and the Strategic Capabilities Office in doing so. In my role as Assistant Secretary of Defense for Research and Engineering, I serve as the Chief Technology Officer for the Department of Defense, and I'm responsible for the Department's strategies and supporting plans to develop and leverage technology needed to support continued U.S. technological superiority. For the last 30 years, the U.S. and our allies have been able to count on a set of unique capabilities in combat that no regional adversary could bring to bear. We're now at a pivotal moment in history where the advanced technical capability and capacity that the nation has relied upon on the battlefield is now being challenged by military technology investments being made by increasingly capable and assertive powers. As Secretary Carter said during his budget rollout testimony, Russia and China are our most stressing competitors. They have developed and continue to advance military systems that threaten our advantages in specific areas. And in some cases, they're developing new weapons and ways of war that seek to achieve their objectives rapidly before they hope we can respond. Our nation has long pursued strategies that leverage U.S. technological advantage as a force multiplier. We need to continue to leverage those advances in technology and in new operational concepts to provide sustained advantage to U.S. forces, shifting the landscape of future national security competition to our advantage by seeking asymmetric opportunities in technological and operational innovation. Merriam-Webster defines an offset as something that serves to counterbalance or compensate for something else. An offset strategy is an approach to military competition that seeks to provide an asymmetric advantage to the United States rather than competing head-to-head or tank-for-tank or plane-for-plane in an area where a potential adversary may also possess potential strength. Instead, an offset strategy seeks to shift the axis of competition through the introduction of new operational concepts and technologies towards one in which the U.S. has a significant and sustainable advantage. The U.S. was successful in pursuing two distinct offset strategies during the Cold War. The first of these offset strategies occurred in the 1950s when President Eisenhower sought to overcome the Warsaw Pact's numerical advantage by leveraging U.S. nuclear superiority to introduce battlefield nuclear weapons, which shifted the axis of competition from competing on conventional force numbers to competing in an area where the U.S. had an advantage. A second offset strategy occurred in the 1980s with the recognition that the Soviet Union had achieved nuclear parity with the United States. The second offset strategy sought to create an enduring advantage by pursuing a brand new approach to joint operations, leveraging the combined effects of near-zero miss distance weapons, real-time targeting, and joint battle networks to create a new era of conventional precision engagement. This combined suite of technologies gave the U.S. a fundamental advantage that we sustained for the last 30 years, capabilities that provide the U.S. and its allies with an asymmetrical advantage in every fight. Today, we see the emergence of increasing technological symmetry, and that's why the Department is discussing the need for a new offset strategy. Today, the third offset strategy is not a document that you can go find in a drawer somewhere in the Pentagon. Instead, the term really describes the broad nature of capabilities that the Department expects to realize over the coming years by pursuing developments in advanced technologies, by conducting experimentation with prototype systems, through increased emphasis on wargaming to help us understand new concepts, and by emphasizing the need to innovate across the entire DoD enterprise. In the fiscal 2017 defense budget request, Secretary Carter identified more than $3.6 billion of investment in FY 2017 and $18 billion in specific investment over the future year defense plan, focused on spurring research, development, and procurement of advanced capabilities that our military will need to fight and win in high-end conflicts in the future. These investments and others directly support and enable a third offset strategy. The investments in the fiscal 2017 defense budget request include new capabilities that can be fielded rapidly through modifying and upgrading existing systems, and we'll be happy to talk about some of those here today, material concepts that could enter accelerated development, and again, something I'd like to talk about are technology-driven concepts that can have a significant impact on the joint force over a longer term. The investments also emphasize the critical importance of focusing on the cost of weapon systems so that we will be able to introduce these kind of disruptive capabilities into the joint force at real scale. Deputy Secretary of Defense Work has emphasized in his remarks the importance of advanced software-enabled capabilities for a third offset. Emerging capabilities in advanced algorithms and software intelligence offer significant potential advantage to a joint force, enabling systems to process large quantities of data at high speed to identify emergent patterns and trends, speeding decision-making and enabling faster than human reaction time in new and emerging areas of conflict such as cyber and electronic warfare, and supporting new models of manned-unmanned combat teaming, and finally permitting new weapons concepts that can operate in critically challenging cyber and electronic warfare constrained environments. The Department's goal to sustain and advance our nation's technological superiority for the 21st century national security environment requires a sound research and development investment strategy. The DoD's research and engineering community works to create options for the Department and serves as a novel and agile innovation engine for the Department. The core science and technology efforts of ASDR&E, the service laboratories of DARPA and SCO are focused on creating long-range opportunities for the Department's future material options. As DoD develops the third offset strategy, the Department's research and engineering enterprise is well prepared to develop, shape, and create technology options to inform future operational concepts. Our goal must always be to ensure that our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines always have the scientific knowledge, the decisive technology, the advanced systems and tools, and the material edge to succeed when called upon. Our research and engineering enterprise measures its success in the security of the nation and the success of our warfighters. Let me close by thanking the committee for its strong interest in and support of the Department's research and engineering efforts as we work to discover, design, and deliver the technology capabilities our warfighters will need in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Probachar, please.
Thank you. Chairwoman Fisher and Senator Nelson, members of the subcommittee, it's a great pleasure to be here with my colleagues today. DARPA is part of the Defense Department. We also work with defense companies and commercial companies, with universities and labs of all sorts. So we are very much part of a very large ecosystem. Within that ecosystem, DARPA has one particular mission, and that is to make the pivotal early investments in breakthrough technologies for national security. We do this work to change what's possible so that the department can revolutionize our military capabilities. Now, today's hearing is about the third offset strategy, and I wanted to just spend a little bit of time to tell you what it means for DARPA. You know, DARPA's work has always focused on technologies to offset our adversaries' capabilities. So the third offset strategy hasn't significantly changed the way we start our programs. which range from radically new military systems to artificial intelligence to biological technologies. What is starting to shift, I think in a very productive way, is the kind of pull that we're getting from the department to transition those technologies. And I'll contrast what's going on today to the environment we were in 5 or 10 years ago. If you look in that period of time, most of DARPA's significant transition successes were direct to theater. We were tracking insurgents' pickup trucks from the air. We were helping to analyze data so that we could help commanders in the field understand the effectiveness of stability operations. And we're very proud of the contributions that we were able to make in that environment. But in that period of and a really intense focus, of course, on the ground war, on counterinsurgency. In that period of time, we found that there was a very limited appetite in the department to move ahead with the kinds of technologies that are going to be necessary to deter and defeat a very sophisticated nation-state adversary. And that's what I think has really shifted today. So today when you look at what's happening across the department, fresh thinking in many ways across the department, including, of course, the third offset strategy. What that means today for DARPA is that many more of our transitions are working directly with the services in partnerships where we're exploring and experimenting and demonstrating what our technologies can do to counter, again, a very sophisticated adversary, very capable opponent. Just to give you one simple example, last week we had the great pleasure of christening a new ship. It's called the Sea Hunter. This ship will be the world's first ship that's able to leave the pier to navigate thousands of miles across open seas without a single sailor on board. And what that means is that it'll be able to do some maritime missions for a tiny fraction of today's operating costs, which is good. But even beyond that, this is the kind of new capability, this kind of unmanned ship now allows us to invent whole new ways to exercise influence across the vastness of the oceans. And that's exactly what we're now doing with the Navy, a series of experiments that we're launching into with them. And that's a partnership that I deeply value in this particular project with the Navy. It's a partnership I don't take for granted, however, because when we started that program, originally called the Active Program, many years ago now at DARPA, starting in the early part of this decade. At that time, we were going it alone for a couple of reasons. Obviously, because at that time the technology was very new and unproven, but also partly because the Navy's priority at that time, as was the whole department's, their focus was on the battle at hand. And today, very much in contrast to that, the Sea Hunter project is actually only one of a growing set of partnerships that we have, transition relationships that we're building with the services, and those cover every kind of operational domain. I mentioned maritime, but also work in the air, space, and ground domains, also work to control the electromagnetic spectrum in cyber and in the information domain. And at DARPA, we see these partnerships as absolutely essential if we're going to get these DARPA technologies from wild new idea to robust operational capability. Let me just conclude this afternoon by touching on two pillars of your support that make it possible for DARPA to do this work. One is, of course, the budget, and your support of the budget over the last few years has been vital in the relative stability that we've enjoyed, and I'll ask you again for your full support of the President's budget request. The second is people, and I want to give a special thanks to this committee for first creating and then over many years supporting a special hiring authority, the 1101 Hiring Authority. This is one of the big reasons that DARPA is able to move fast and to hire exceptional people. So those are the two elements, great people and the trust that you place in us. This is why DARPA is able to create breakthrough technologies for national security. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Dr. Roper.
Chairman Fisher, Ranking Member Nelson, and members of the committee, thank you for your interest in the third offset. Thank you for your interest in the department's return to great power competition. Thank you for your interest in the Strategic Capabilities Office, or SCO. It's an honor to be here with colleagues from the research and development arm of the department who are striving to maintain our technology edge against a world of threats. As mentioned earlier, these threats now span a space from non-state terrorism all the way up through great power competition. And the third offset is really trying to return a greater focus of our department's effort, including the budget, to those highly sophisticated adversaries. In 2012, the SCO was created by Secretary Carter as one piece of this broader strategy, specifically a near-term piece that is focused on trying to regain advantage. So I would like to discuss the way that we frame immediate challenges, our process for prototyping solutions, and how we're working to do these prototypes in a partnership with the services. This will be the focus of my remarks today. Though daunting in many respects, we interpret our immediate challenges via a fairly simple analogy, but an instructive one, that the U.S. military is akin to a football team that has run a very successful playbook, but for a bit too long. As in football, where opponents watch film to try to find weaknesses to exploit them, 20 years of operations in the Middle East have given great powers a lot of valuable game film to roll right into their weapons development. So SCO's response to this is to do what football teams do. Great teams often find themselves overanalyzed and exploited, but they don't throw away their playbooks. They use this vulnerability and turn it into opportunity by creating trick plays. They start running in their pass formations, passing in their run formations. They reimagine their strengths rather than playing to their opponents. And like fashion, we can rejuvenate our military playbook if we can reimagine its strengths. Ships, aircraft, submarines, things we're familiar with. If we start using them in unforeseen and unexpected ways, we can hope to buy back some of the competitive edge that we're losing to great powers. SCO was created to do precisely this. Though our strategy often has advantages of lower cost and rapidity, its core tenet, which is our need to change, is anchored in our greatest advantage of all, experienced operators who can do the unparalleled with today's systems and can rapidly master any unconventional tactic we throw at them. This strategy also will provide healthy connective tissue between our past and future efforts. The past by keeping taxpayer investments for as viable for as long as possible, and the future by trying to buy time for these future technologies, future systems, the leap aheads to field. Because of this, we were tapped to be a near-term component of the broader offset strategy, and our goal is a simple one, to try to enhance our current deterrence backed by an arsenal of surprises using systems that we have today. Our process for achieving this is itself innovative because it flows in reverse from the normal one, from operational needs to systems, actually from systems to operational needs rather than vice versa. Living within the constraints of existing hardware and software focuses ideas early on, it encourages cross-domain thinking, and necessitates close partnerships with the services to pull off these high-risk prototypes. In 3.5 years of practice, we've done 23 capabilities working with the services. 6 of them will transition by the end of this year, and none have failed to transition thus far. These projects, which are really our versions of trick plays, take on one of 3 forms: repurposing a system for a new mission it wasn't designed to do, integrating systems into a team that can perform the function together but not separately, and including or incorporating enabling commercial technology. I'm sure we'll cover some examples today, but let me highlight 3 of them. Unconventional weapons. Standard Missile 6 was originally designed to defend our ships. We've partnered with the Navy to give it an offensive anti-ship role. You can also do unconventional defense. Army howitzers, Navy projectiles, Air Force radars weren't designed to be a defensive system, but we're partnering to Frankenstein these into a low-cost supersonic missile defense shield. You can also do unconventional teams or kill chains. Stealth fighters were originally designed to use their organic weapons. We're partnering with the Air Force to team them with large standoff arsenal planes so that they don't have to go land and resupply during a fight. Our Third Eye program is taking this even further, connecting disparate sensors and shooters from across the Joint Force. The rest and best of our details necessarily remain classified, but I hope these few examples give you a sense of how broad the applications could be. We should really let no facet of future conflict be predictable or be as it seems. As one of the bellwethers for the return to great power competition, I'm pleased to say that SCO is making significant progress in making current systems count towards a future that's shaped by us and not for us. I really appreciate your interest in this topic, appreciate this hearing today, and I look forward to any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, and again, welcome to all of you. I think this is going to be a fascinating hearing. Secretary Welby, if I could begin. A fact sheet that was provided by the OSD states that realizing the third offset strategy will require the right combination of bottom-up innovation and experimentation to push the technical and operational envelope, and senior leader top-down direction to initiate major programmatic, operational, and organizational change. So I'd like to ask you about that last part. What the major programmatic, operational, and organization changes are being made as part of that offset strategy, or basically what's the department proposing to do differently in this budget request with regards to the offset strategy?
Chairman, if you look to the investments that are in the 17 budget, there are some very significant muscle movements that you can see in that budget. I'll point to a couple of key technology areas first. A major reinvestment in hypersonic capabilities, an increase in the number of systems that we're carrying to the range in the hypersonics weapon regime by 50%, an increase in the investment in our ranges to increase our hypersonic capabilities, and investments in our laboratories and industry to take those systems from being technology demonstrators to being no-kidding weapons that we could actually think about deploying with our force. In the undersea arena, you see a significant reinvestment in unmanned undersea vehicles as an augment to our manned undersea force, as a significant force multiplier, as a key experimental asset for the future of the Navy. You can see within that budget significant investments looking at a variety of novel weapons concepts that might have significant applications to the future force. Over the last year, you've seen the department really open its aperture to all sources of potential innovation, to include engaging the defense industrial base in terms of ensuring transparency on their IRAD investments so we can march forward together collectively against these kind of challenges, understanding what they're investing in, understanding what we're investing in. And you've seen the department engaging the innovative commercial sector through outreach efforts like DIUX on the West Coast, and the Secretary's continuous engagement with the commercial sector, trying to find ways to bring both people and ideas back into the department to reinvigorate our activities. We are re-emphasizing the importance of the DoD laboratories to this initiative, the laboratories in the individual services, and our engagement with partner laboratories in DOE as well as innovation engines that can help drive the future of the department. And we are emphasizing the need for speed from laboratory to fleet. The recognition that there's enormous innovation that has continued within the laboratories, even while the department may have reduced its focus on fielding that capability, but that store of novel ideas needs to be taken to the test ranges and experimented with. Finally, I want to point to the focus on prototyping and experimentation. When you look to the second offset that occurred in the 80s, the ideas for those technologies emerged in the mid-70s. And in 79 and 80, the department conducted a series of major experiments out in the western ranges where we put together precision weapons, long-range ISR platforms, the first flights of what became Joint Stars, the first systems of what became the Army ATACMS, early flights of Apache Longbow, and many other capabilities. And across the range, in the classified portfolio at that time, we were flying the F-117 and experimenting with the emergence of real stealth capabilities. That incredible innovative energy that occurred at the operational level, not simply doing laboratory experiments, but putting it in the hands of operators and letting them understand how they might fight those capabilities, is what enabled the set of capabilities that in the 80s, as the Reagan defense buildup, we didn't buy the same things. We bought an entire new generation of capabilities. But we didn't buy it blind. We bought it with the knowledge that came from those exercises. The department is now preparing for another series of investments in prototyping and experimentation. We want to get our ranges busy again. We want to get new systems out on those ranges. Whether we procure them all or not, we want to learn from those systems and inform what we need in the future. And so making the department smart for its future choices.
And in the budget's $3.6 billion, funding specifically related to the offset strategy. Can you provide the committee with a breakdown of this funding? Will you get that information to us, please, by programs?
I'd be happy to provide you details. Some of those
You've mentioned a lot of them, but can you get us the detail by program for
I'd be
that,
happy to do
for
that.
that spending? Thank you. Also, we're going to have a change of administration in January. And what sort of things do you want to have accomplished by that time to demonstrate that this effort is on the right path?
I'm sure that any transition team for any administration to come is going to face the same set of challenges that we face today. The pull here is the recognition of the need to address U.S. strengths in a future competitive national security environment. That's an external pull. This is not, while this is Dr. Carr's initiative, it's a deputy's initiative, while I'm trying to drive this, it's not driven by personality, it's driven by the nation's need to refresh our technology.
Right, and what are you going to point to that you've accomplished? I think you have a lot of support on this committee. We understand the importance of where we're headed with technology in order to change war fighting so that we continue to defend this country. So how are we going to make sure this moves forward?
We're not going to stop for the next 9 months of running to make sure that the next administration has a running start at these problems. We've completed recently the Long Range Research and Development Planning Program, an 18-month study that looked at details and laid out a series of opportunities for the nation going forward. All that material we're trying to harness across the laboratory complex today to make sure we're ready for what comes next. And so I think that this budget and the initiatives we have ongoing prepare for that future in an important way and lay ground for the next administration.
Okay. Thank you very much. Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ms. Secretary, thank you for your public service. Dr. Bakar and Dr. Roper, given the fact that I've already spent a great deal of time with both of you asking a lot of questions, and given the fact that our enemy's spies are listening to what you say today, I really don't want to ask you any questions in an open session. And I would invite the members of this subcommittee to get in a classified setting to figure out some of the gee whiz stuff that these folks are doing. But since it's an open setting, I'm just going to leave it to you. Say whatever you'd like, and that's all I'm going to say.
Well, it's hard to resist an invitation like that. Thank you very much, Senator Nelson. You know, I think absolutely the details of the programs that we think can be very impactful here do need to remain classified, and of course we're happy to provide classified briefing to any of you who would like to come do that. We'd be very pleased to do it. I actually think the most interesting aspect of what we're all working on in the third offset strategy and these advanced technologies, really the question as a technologist that I see is, in a world in which we no longer get to have all the toys and nobody else gets to have any technology capability. That was an unusual period after the Second World War when we had that enormous technological advantage over the rest of the world. That's not the world anymore, and we all know that technology, wherever it originates, it flows. We know that many other countries now have amazing engineers and scientists and laboratory facilities. And by the way, all of that is really good for the world. It's elevated living standards. It's connected us in new ways. So most of that is good news. The challenge, of course, that this is all about is the fact that we still have to come up with a technological edge for national security despite a more and more level playing field of initial technologies. And I actually think the success here is going to come from something that's a deeply American way of approaching the problem. And you know, a lot of what we do at DARPA is about this idea that we're willing to take risk to reach for high payoff, and we are willing to try things that might fail. But in combining these commercial technologies, accessing leading-edge commercial technology, and then combining it with places where we do have an edge and where we can protect the technology, at least for some period of time. If we can learn to do that and move faster than anyone else around the planet, I'm actually quite confident that we are still going to be able to win in this competition.
Senator Nelson, I think it's an important point that you raise, is that a lot of the technology edges that we're going to develop, are developing, and will be moving to testing very soon, are surprises. They're things that are intended to deal us back into the game. They're intended to project power in different ways that we haven't before. And there's going to be a very difficult calculus that we're starting to begin as part of the third offset effort, which is it a surprise that we want to tuck behind our locked doors and save to be able to win a war? We have to be able to do that. That's our job as the department. But if we were to put every surprise that we develop behind the door, we would be biasing our portfolio towards a go-to-war posture as opposed to a deterrent posture. So one of the challenges we're going to have is we're back into a deterrent mode as the department. But as opposed to the Cold War, it's not a monopolar deterrent posture. We've got to do it in a bipolar way. We must be able to think about China and Russia while we continue to focus on the Middle East, continue to focus on North Korea. So there's no easy math for deciding whether or not you show a capability or not. We've started putting some of our capabilities public now from Strategic Capabilities Office. We have had almost no public face for 3.5 years. As you were able to see yesterday, quite a lot of our portfolio is behind the door, and deeply so. But if we put everything there, we'll be doing the country a disservice in the long run.
Thank you. Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for being here, and I look forward to future briefings in a classified setting. I appreciate the work that y'all have done. I'm going to go to the more maybe boring side of the equation, and it has to do with actually getting good ideas fielded and in use. So that gets to procurement, acquisition, specification, partnering with the private sector where it's appropriate. Can you give me some idea where you all think we are and where we need to focus, perhaps even as a matter of public policy changes to remove constraints and try and compress idea to fielding timelines over what we have today? We'll start with the Secretary.
Senator, we're emphasizing in every engagement speed. As we enter a more competitive future where we're all drawing off a globally accessible technology base, we're going to need to close our acquisition OODA loop, if you will, faster than our adversaries. We have to turn quickly. We need to think about time to market like folks do in the commercial sector. And we've been engaging our laboratories in discussion about how quickly we can move ideas from our tech base to the field. There's no way to rush discovery. I mean, science takes the time it takes. But we ought to be thinking, even as we're exploring new areas, about that application and how we can prime the pump for that application. On the acquisition side, we've been challenging ourselves to be able to move faster, especially at that cutting edge of new technologies. We've been looking for ways to be able to engage new partners in timelines that might be measured in weeks rather than months and often a year to contract. Especially as we're dealing with fast-moving technology areas, people aren't willing to wait for a year for the department to get involved. There's no return on that. They'd rather focus on commercial sector engagements. And so we've been exploring new means to much more rapidly bring folks onto contract, to use competitive vehicles in commercial acquisition, and to think about new ways to bring technology into platforms and systems, leveraging modular open system architecture approaches, for example, to be able to plug and play technologies into our existing systems to speed the upgrade cycle. So I think that through the S&T initiatives, through the formal acquisition initiatives, the Department's Better Buying Power 3.0 activities, which have a large focus on modularity and tech insertion, I think that we are trying to move much faster as we go forward. I think in the future we won't see 30-year development programs in anything. And adversaries will have countermeasures prepared for a decade before we field something, if that's the case. And so we need to up our game in terms of speed. And I don't know if anybody else has anything you want to add.
I would just add, first of all, that in the work that we do at DARPA, of course, we live in the science and technology part of the portfolio. And so I want to be very clear that our task in developing technologies is not as onerous as procuring systems that our warfighters, need to be confident in and that can trust under extreme circumstances. Having said that, we've had the opportunity over the last many decades now at DARPA to experiment with some novel procurement mechanisms that your committee invented and authorized over numbers of years. One example is Other Transactions Authority. That's an example of a capability that we and others in the department have. We've used it to great effect, essentially to do business with companies on commercial terms. We comply with the law, but we are able, under Other Transactions Authority, to set aside the federal acquisition regulations and part of that, of course, means that we're not forcing companies to do government accounting systems and to have that burden. So especially for commercial companies, it's a particularly good way to be able to move faster, and sometimes it just enables them to be willing to do business with us in the first place. So I think there's some practices like that I think we've been able to pilot that we hope can be expanded.
Dr. Roper.
And Senator, I think, our piece within SCO is really trying to complete the circle on the acquisition process. So we currently flow from an operational need to a future system that we field. And as Secretary Welby pointed out, there are lots of efforts underway to try to speed that cycle up. But wherever we can find ways to take things that have come out of that pipeline and bring them back to the beginning, solve additional operational needs, whether they're within that service or outside of it, then we're producing lower cost options that will allow that service to build budgets where there's more innovation in them. The biggest issue that service programmers bring up to me is that they want to innovate. And I can attest from the programs we do with them, there is incredible innovation potential in the services. It's resident in every partnership we build with them. But when they build a budget, if their readiness, the fight tonight capability is put at risk, the first thing that has to go is the innovation side of it. So wherever we can buy them flexibility and breathing room to keep that innovation in play, we're doing a good thing not just for them but for the country. So we've got to make stuff that our taxpayers have already invested in do more and stay viable longer if we're going to free up funds to go for the big win technology leap aheads.
Yeah, and I think your point about turning defensive weapons and transforming them into offensive capabilities and vice versa is very good. Because I'm assuming that the time to field that capability is far less than an all-new platform, and that's why it's important that we squeeze everything we can. In my remaining time, you touched on something, Dr. Roper, that I was going to ask, and I know that Secretary Carter's announced a program engaging, trying to expand our engagement with Silicon Valley and partnering with some of the major tech firms. But in my experience, I'm from North Carolina and down in and around Fort Bragg, there's a lot of small businesses that come from people who have battlefield experience. They're coming out, they're perfecting things that have extraordinary potential, more often than not, because they had to put the first iteration together with duct tape and super glue. They had to use commercially available products. To what extent does your area of focus on sometimes you need a $100 saddle because you got a $100 horse, but sometimes you got a $10 horse problem you're wanting to solve, which is what I've seen a lot of these folks doing down here, and it seems like every once in a while DoD wants to put a $100 saddle even on a $10 horse. So how are we getting some of that applied small business feedback into the mix as a key part of the innovation loop?
Maybe two quick responses. First is that I'm frustrated that a lot of the discussion around engaging the innovation ecosystem has used Silicon Valley as the term of art. But quite frankly, there is remarkable work going on from Boston to Austin to Silicon Valley, Research Triangle. I'm coming right back to that one. But I'll touch everybody in the room. But look, it's and I think that there's really interesting things going on the small business side. The direct to phase 2 piece, for example, on our civil work is now, we've now identified new mechanisms by which we can reach out and touch small businesses, not just at the, hey, do a study for us scale, but no kidding, rapidly move into a prototype so we can try it, to get at those folks who have near immediate solutions and put them into test and evaluation. As the Secretary has pointed out, the Department needs to focus on porosity, our openness to ideas wherever they come. We need to take the blinders off and not just simply look to the defense industrial base as the only source. It's an important source, but it's not the only source of ideas, and we're trying to reach out anywhere we can.
Thank you, Senator Tillis. Senator Heinrich.
Secretary Walby, this committee last year showed really strong bipartisan support for directed energy weapon systems in the NDAA, and we asked that the department look at that as part of the third offset approach. How much of the $100 million provided by Congress last year within this effort has gone towards directed energy?
Thank you, Senator. We have not, the language in the report last year for the Offset Technology Initiative requested that we go out and survey the services looking for competitive ideas, survey the COCOMs looking for ideas. We have completed that. We have a stack of proposals that we're going through now, and we're allocating resources against them. Expect to be able to provide the details of what we fund from that list here in the next week or two. I am certain that in that stack of proposals, there will be directed energy. They are near the top of the list of things we want to do. I'm expecting that of the list of things, order of 20% would be focused on directed energy, but we're still trying to finalize both the list and ensuring we've got the right budgets for those projects. We want to make sure that the things we do fund with that activity are robust and are not underfunded.
I agree wholeheartedly with that approach. And just to sort of follow up on that, I'm curious about, it seems to me that this technology, directed energy in particular, could be one of those places where we really do provide an offset. It doesn't have a peer relatable equivalent in other military spaces. And I actually introduced legislation this morning with Senator Inhofe to look at granting rapid acquisition authorities for directed energy weapon systems. And I'm curious, and this could be for any of you actually, in your opinions, is this an area where the department is moving fast enough to transition the technology, or are we sort of stuck in an endless R&D loop where it's always easier to chase the perfect instead of field what is quite applicable today?
Senator, I participated in the Directed Energy Professional Society symposium at the Pentagon today. We have over timing. We have 20 folks sitting in the courtyard of the Pentagon today demonstrating next generation laser capabilities and high power microwave capabilities. As you know, I've spent a good portion of my career working in this space. And I remain convinced that we are now at the point where we're moving out of the labs and into application space with those kind of systems. I saw some remarkable technology on display today, and we're encouraging folks to think about how we can accelerate those into real applications. So I think that directed energy has suffered from always being just 25 years off. I think we're now not 25 years off. I think there are real applications in the near term and opportunities to grow those applications in the midterm. And so I'm excited about this space.
I appreciate you mentioning microwaves as somebody who used to work at Air Force Research Labs on microwaves as well as lasers. Sometimes we forget that application, and when you look at things like CHAMP and other applications, it is substantial. For really any of you, one of the things I'm concerned about, with the possible exception of DARPA, actually, I think there's been a real risk averseness generally within the R&D approach of the Department of Defense at times. And, you know, in looking at our nuclear labs, one of the things that has worked there to get around an obvious, you know, it's easy to be risk averse in this environment. You've seen huge advances, for example, in energy with things like solar technology, prices plummeting, but one cylindric can become a political issue. And it's easy to accept that same sort of mindset within defense research. LDRD, Laboratory Directed Research and Development, has been one of the places where within the nuclear labs, it really has seemed to be a high risk but high reward endeavor that is incredibly valuable, for one, in attracting the right talent into the pool in the first place. So I'm curious how the department views that balance between risk and reward, and what steps are needed to ensure that researchers have the leeway and the flexibility to pursue something that is truly innovative.
Senator, across the laboratory complex, we have to recognize that there's a number of constituents we try to service. There are near-term transitions into programs of record. There are those medium-term capabilities that seek to be able to demonstrate capability to drive the next program of record. And then there are activities that are further to the left that are really trying to be disruptive. And we have been focusing the laboratories over the last year on trying to be explicit about how we manage those three portfolios, how we think about those things that are near-term and in service of programs of record, how we think about those things that are shaping kind of the next program, and those things that are much more foundational. Just a couple examples of things that we're doing. Across laboratories, we've now created resources available to laboratories out of the OSD level budgets, where we've asked the laboratories to compete on ideas for who has the greatest game changer. And we've offered to amplify service budgets in areas where we can see that real impact. Internal competitions, right? But to get teams challenged and thinking about competing with each other kind of across the laboratory complexes. The trick is, of course, at the end, we tend to team those folks together to get all the best and brightest of those ideas across, because we're really in one game. But it's encouraged folks to think differently. And within the services as well, each of the services has been trying to drive more innovation to their own long-term S&T pools, and I'm very excited about how that's taking place.
Maybe just to tag on to that, DARPA is very much in the high-risk, high-payoff business, and I never take for granted the room that we get to do that, starting with our bosses, starting with Steve, but all the way up to the Secretary, and definitely from Congress. And that, you know, I feel very privileged to lead an organization that has delivered on that mission for long enough that you all give us rope. All we have to do is come up with the next revolutionary capability. But within the agency as well, I don't take for granted how we nurture that. And Steve's exactly right that you do need to manage a high-risk organization in a very different way. But continually nurturing that culture, making sure that our business processes reflect the mission and that culture. It's everything from the conversations I have with my program managers when I walk by their offices to the way that they work to get their programs approved. So I think it's something that needs concerted focus, but I think we know how to do it, and I think it is an essential ingredient in the mix.
Great.
Thank you, Senator Heinrich. Senator Manchin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And thank you all. I'd like to ask, I think this is to Mr. Welby, if I may, Secretary. Secretary Carter recently announced a major initiative for outreach to high-tech companies in Silicon Valley, as you know. DoD also has a small business innovation research program that taps into technology innovations from all around the country. The SBIR program helps small business compete to bring value-added products and services to our military. This program is extremely helpful for the economy of West Virginia because we have a corridor which really participates in that. So I'd like to ask, how are we coordinating efforts in engaging these small companies to work with DOE? And my reason for saying that, some of them getting through the procurement process, they have to tag along with a large major in order to get any pittance of a little bit of work, and they become subservient to that. Is there any method of getting them directly into the flow, if you will?
Senator, I also highly value the small business innovative research activities. I think that my experience working with companies in the small business innovative research area has allowed them to grow rapidly and actually contribute in important ways to major defense acquisition programs. I mentioned earlier the direct to phase 2 activities, which allow us to make initial grants to companies at a much larger scale than simply here's $100K to kind of go develop a proposal, the very early study grants that SBIR has typically worked through, to cut a year off the time to get people up to scale and to be really playing at real working levels. Up to $1 million for initial grant, which is a lot for a small company in initial space. The one thing I want to point out about the kind of engagements we have with this Defense Innovation Unit Experimental, for example, is again, it's not geographically tied. We want them to be engaged over a broader portion of the country, and we've not given them acquisition authority. That organization is really intended to help shepherd small companies through the process make intro to help them understand the process, to, if you will, act as a shepherd, to kind of help them work their way through the system. We're experimenting with that idea that getting small companies, getting the kind of core innovation drivers that we see in small business through our system is a contact sport and requires significant help. Folks who speak their language, who understand the innovation ecosystem, understand companies' commercial ambitions as well, and can still talk DoD to them. And so we're trying to understand how that works. That's the experimental portion of DIUX. It really is an experiment to see how we can engage better. But we are trying to find new opportunities to introduce small business work throughout our enterprise. We're continuously reinforcing our small business participation objectives in all of our programs.
You all go out and solicit this? I mean, go talk to some of the areas where they're, not just Silicon Valley, but I mean other.
I do, and our team does, and we are
Can
thinking
we get
hard
you down
about.
to West Virginia? Can I get you down?
Sir, I'd love the opportunity to come visit, and I'd
Hey, Rick,
take your
sign
choice.
him up. We'll get you down there. It's not that far away. To Dr. Probek here, one of the joys of being a senator is being able to nominate some of the best and brightest to our military academies. It's really, really something special. When you see these young, bright people coming from all over the country and getting this opportunity. So I would ask, DARPA regularly engages with civilian universities, which we're very appreciative of that too, for the advanced research efforts. So how, what's the percentage of how you all engage with our military academies versus the private? Because we know it's going to be used, and I'm understanding that basically they do a senior project, all the military academies, to participate in the cutting-edge defense research. These are people not only participating, but going to be fulfilling them. So do you put more of an emphasis on the academies than you do private?
Senator, our starting point with everything that we do at DARPA is to go out and find the technical talents that are going to have the ideas and the ability to go execute on them. And through that, we work with universities of all sorts, but also, of course, a lot with companies of all sizes.
You pay, right?
We fund those projects and those companies. We're actually only.
We're already funding. We already fund the military academies. We already pay once.
And I think it's a great question you've raised, because I think about the people who are attending those military academies frequently. They are going to be the warfighters who use the technologies that we are brewing. And so we reach out to them in a variety of ways. In recent years, as an example, we conducted a competition among the academies in the cyber arena. That's one in particular where there's a lot of interest, but also a great need to continue to educate warfighters that are going to be adept in the cyber environment. So they are very much part of our community.
Would it be possible to get a report basically on the amount of money that you all do put out in doing these, engaging in these research?
Yeah, I'd be happy to look into that, just to set
private
your.
versus academies.
I'd be happy to get you that data. Just to set your expectation, the amount of research that's done of the sort that we typically fund at the academies is fairly limited, because their focus, of course, is educating these young folks who are going to become our future warfighters. So I would be happy to get you that data.
What you're doing,
but that's
you're
not
getting
where
me-
the
you're-
research is typically done.
So you're telling me right now you don't put much in academies?
I don't think you'll find a significant amount of money flowing there.
Let
Again,
me ask
their
you this
role
one.
is different
The
than what
cadets
we do.
and midshipmen start their senior project. They have to have a senior project.
Yep.
Okay? Do they know there's a pathway that they could take something of high cutting edge, such as what you all are looking for? I mean, to me, maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. I just believe that we've got some outstanding, I'm not saying the universities, and we have research WVU and all them, but I'm saying we already own this. This belongs to us. And those are 4 to 5 year deployments afterwards. So we know they're going to be the ones who are going to be implementing everything we're doing.
Yes, I agree that they are an important part. But again, DARPA's role is about research. It's not really the education of that part of, that critical part of our workforce.
I got you. That's fair. No further questions.
Thank you, Senator Manchin. I think it's safe to say that the goal of this initiative is to preserve and enhance our technology-based military superiority, and that's part of the meaning of the term offset. We're not going to be fighting our adversaries tank to tank anymore, and so technology does provide us that advantage and the offset with capabilities for others. Dr. Roper, I'm concerned that we become so reliant upon technology that that reliance can be exploited. and it can be exploited very cheaply in some instances. And I think space is a good example for us to look at in that regard. Our adversaries can jeopardize our constellation for a lot less money than developing new technology for us to build here and take advantage of that. So how do you ensure that the greater incorporation of technology doesn't turn into a dependence? And how do you ensure that we don't allow our adversaries this opportunity to be able to undermine what we're trying to do in a really, basically a cheap way? And Dr. Probakar, I'd like to ask you that as well.
Thank you, Senator. It's a great question. And so I'll address the space component of it, but I'd like to then broaden to the bigger question
Yes.
of, where does technology end and other advantages begin? So I think as indicated by a lot of the discussion this morning, we're moving into a regime where relative technology advantage is going to be lowering amongst the great powers in the world, so the U.S., China,
Our
Russia.
adversaries are catching up to us.
Catching up, and we're also living in a world where technology is speeding up. So the impact of commercially available technologies is going to be large. It's also going to be available to everyone. And so this is going to force the department, as well as our adversaries and competitors, it's going to force us to become fast adapters. So when we look at areas where the environment's going to be contested, and space is one of those, there's obviously the disadvantage of not having the legacy way that we've projected power be something that can be continued into the future. But we'll be moving into a future where there is hope for us. It's very likely that we'll start having distributed space architectures in future where maybe individual satellites are contestable, but the architecture as a whole isn't. That'll force us to start using statistics as a metric, where you can't calculate the reliability of a single thing, but you're doing it in aggregate. That's something very common for many industries. The cellular companies that sell to us are used to having a statistical approach to their availability as opposed to a singular one. What I think this means is that warfighting is going to be messy. We're not going to be able to go in and have very simple mathematics and physics help us calculate the margin of battle. Things are going to be constantly changing. Satellites that are available won't be. Networks that are available won't be. And if we're wise, we'll have architectures in place where we hop between different assets that are available. I think that's where we actually get off the stage with our biggest advantage. That's a messy environment. Not every country is going to be able to get their operators ready to deal with it. So the greatest advantage we have, and the reason I think we'll pull this offset off, is that we're coming out of 20 years of operational experience that no one in the world can match. And so we're saying to the world we're going to change. We're going to go into this messy environment with our eyes open, and we're going to dominate in it. And that's based on giving operators, one, the technology to be able to adapt in that environment, but trusting them to be able to use it and master it. So I think the biggest ill that we could do as a department is to have all the shiny bells and whistles in the technology world, which are important, override what's underwriting it, which is our human operator foundation.
Thank you. Dr. Probakar.
Yeah, I think Will's completely correct with especially his concluding point. I often think about how reliant, even in our civilian lives, we've all become on GPS, right? I mean, you'll just follow that blue dot or listen to those instructions. And of course, that's a great example of needing to remember that technology is a very powerful tool, but it doesn't allow you to suspend judgment. And we've seen some examples where that's really gone wrong. Technology is, of course, only going to be one component in the solutions that we're talking about here. We very much see part of our job, of course, driving the technology, but also thinking in terms of how do we make it secure and reliable. Cybersecurity is a very big part of that, and of course we have a significant portfolio that focuses on that. But at the end of the day, it really is about how humans use the technology, and I think as we have moved from more of a gadget focus to how do you think about winning the war, it has really driven our thinking to really think about the whole system of how humans and machines are going to interact together. And that's a much harder problem and a much richer problem, but I think it's going to be important to getting to solutions that really do work.
And Mr. Welby, I've seen a fact sheet that was put out by the department, and it it discusses those investments that I believe the doctor was just talking about with the human and the machine collaboration that's going on. It states all of these components will be connected to a cyber-hardened human-machine command and control network. You know, we're not really good at keeping adversaries out of our networks. Let me rephrase that. We are good at it, at keeping them out, but they still get in. So how are we going to have confidence that we have the ability to build this cyber-hardened network? And do you think that the network should come before we think about the pieces that rely upon it? Should we make sure we have the security there before we get the bells and the whistles that depend upon it?
Senator, I believe that there's a real opportunity here to co-design these capabilities in ways we have not in the past. One of the really interesting things that's going on is this notion of autonomous systems, systems that I can give direction to, and that I can have confidence that they're going to have certain behavior, and then check back in with me at some future point. And that offers a way to think about how systems can actually operate even on unreliable networks. By reducing the bandwidth required to, for example, teleoperate a system, by having the ability to have systems interact with humans by exception, just as I would with send a soldier up a hill, call me if you see something that you need assistance with. I can start to think about machines that might be able to do that. We're talking about manned-unmanned teaming and trying to understand how that works, what kind of bandwidth is required, where and when systems need to interact. I think is very important in scoping the networks required to support those. We did some recent studies where we looked at just how little bandwidth was required to ensure control over, in a simulated environment, over some notional unmanned system concepts. And we were very enthusiastic about the ability to shrink that amount of bandwidth required in very interesting ways. The smaller the pipe, the easier it is to protect. And so we're thinking about very novel ideas in that space.
There's a discussion going on in the Commerce Committee about spectrum, since you're talking about bandwidth. You said you're shrinking the bandwidth that's necessary for the Department of Defense. Would you say you don't need all that you have? Put you on the spot.
Today, I think we need all we have and more.
You need it all.
We need it all, and particularly for radar is really one of the critical things. Our large bandwidth sensors are really a challenge. Spectrum auction has caused the department to have to shift in very complex ways, and we're trying to work through that. With my technology hat on, I am very excited about agile spectral use in the future and ways we can start to think about the technologies that will help shift not just the military sector, but maybe on someday the commercial sector to be much more efficient users of spectrum. And I am enormously excited about the initiatives that DARPA has started here in the last 2 weeks to set up prizes associated with very novel use of the spectrum, an arena to challenge folks come in with entirely new concepts for agile radio development, to think about new ways that we can architect our commercial and military systems to be really efficient users locally, regionally, and globally to make the most use of the spectrum we have. The demand for spectrum is only going in one direction. Wide bandwidth applications on the commercial side, wide bandwidth applications on the military side are going to grow. But in the fight, which is what we were talking about a moment ago, we're going to want to be able to, if we lose that spectrum, to still be able to fight through. And we think there's very interesting ways we can do that. And I don't know if Arthur, you want to say a word about the spectrum challenge.
You can tell Steve is a DARPA alum because he summarized our new DARPA program.
I was going to say,
perfectly.
because we have such a truly limited amount, a finite amount of spectrum that's out there, and to find a more efficient way to use it would be beneficial, of course, for our national security, but also for our businesses that are out there as well. Thank you. Senator Kane.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I apologize for being late. It was at another subcommittee hearing, so I may ask questions that you've already covered, but it's good to be with you, and thank you for your service. I'm interested in the interface between the DoD requirements and commercial requirements in a very, complex commercial environments. Generally, do security requirements of the DoD exceed the commercial space, or in many ways, is the commercial sector market develop the industry and some of the security ahead of the DoD need?
I'll take a stab at that. You know, if you peel apart what DoD needs in terms of information security, cybersecurity in particular, we need everything that the commercial sector needs because we use commercial networks and computers and systems for all of our operations. And we have cybersecurity needs for our very sophisticated electronics and computing that's embedded in every, you know, every missile, every aircraft, every ship, et cetera. And so across DoD, I think we have the challenge of adopting as quickly as we can the leading edge of commercial cyber technologies, and we continue to press, you know, the department continues to press forward on that. Conversely, in some areas where we are able to drive cybersecurity research because of DoD's embedded computing needs, I think there are places where we're, and for example, in some of the DARPA programs, we have focused on this question of can you build a cyber retrofit, for example, for a system that goes on an unmanned aircraft. And we've just had some very good research success in that area. That's an example of research that I think at this point is leading edge around the world. Eventually, I think it will become an important part of a better foundation of cybersecurity for DoD systems, but it's the same technology that will also provide a secure way for the Internet of Things to grow. And you know, the Internet of Things is either going to be awesome if we can figure out security, or it's going to be a nightmare. And I think, you know, I think that's an example of a technology area driven for DoD that we can also actually contribute to the broader set of
Sort of, it's a good segue to the follow-up question I wanted to ask. So if some of the particular requirements we have in the DoD space will really be driven by our own research, then we obviously need to be robust in funding research. But to the extent that some of it is going to be commercial capacity that we purchased, and that says something about acquisition and the acquisition workforce. As I deal with folks in the kind of private sector, they are quite concerned about is the acquisition workforce up to the job. They actually really kind of sympathize with an acquisition workforce. They feel like the DoD and maybe the federal generally acquisition workforce got hammered pretty hard by furloughs, sequesters, layoffs, and that may have hurt the acquisition workforce expertise pretty significantly. And so if we're talking about really cutting edge, technology to help us with this third offset strategy, and some of it we're going to be acquiring, that's going to put a lot on the shoulders of the acquisition workforce to make wise decisions. Do we have, DoD-wide, do we have the workforce we need to make the sophisticated acquisition decisions as we purchase these technologies?
Senator, across the Acquisition Technology and Logistics Enterprise, working for Undersecretary Kendall, we review kind of our workforce metrics continuously. We have a senior steering group that meets monthly, and we review it at the senior level quarterly to ensure that we understand what's happening to the health of that workforce, hiring, retention, departures, the overall shape of the workforce. But increasingly, the thing that concerns me is not numbers, but talent. And specific talent in areas like cybersecurity, in areas like robotics.
Where competition is pretty tough, so other opportunities are out there.
I note that last week, Google announced, and I believe the number was 20% raise across the board for everybody at Google who had cyber in their title. Not that they were being recruited, but just as a preemptive retention bonus. Our folks haven't seen kind of a 20% number, ever, right? And I don't think folks fully appreciate that in some of the areas that we're focused on, artificial intelligence, the cutting-edge computer science work, in cyber, in synthetic biology, and a number of other areas, we are getting great people because they love our mission, they love our capability, but really they're often giving up kind of integer multiples on compensation. And certainly over the course of their career, it becomes harder and harder as folks try to get families to think through how they can make that work. I'm very appreciative for the great people who are working for us every day, but I worry about our ability to compete for talent in the future. And it suggests we may have to think about other models for how we can recruit, retain, or engage those folks. If the government can't have them internal to our organization, how do we engage them outside? How do we ensure that we've got the right set of knowledge on our side of the table on the acquisition process? How do we have the right set of folks in our lab thinking about the future for us? I think we're going to be in a competition not only for national security, but in a competition for talent as commercial opportunities grow, as our nation's vibrant innovation sector on the commercial side competes with the Department of Defense for talent. We're now mining the same spaces, and we're going to have to be creative as we go forward.
Let me ask a question. It kind of goes in a different direction on the third offset strategy. So, and it's really doctrinal or conceptual. Earlier defense strategies, it's been easier for me to conceptualize how we integrate our allies into our strategies, you know, dealing with the Truman Doctrine of the Cold War, or even some of what we're doing right now, vis-a-vis engagements in Iraq and Syria. As we think about a third offset strategy that's heavily focused on novel technologies that are unique, swarm capacities, et cetera, how do we conceive of alliances and sharing of information, or is the sharing of information by definition then jeopardize your edge in a way that we can't do it? I mean, and that's a pretty broad question, but I've been wondering how we think about alliances and partners in connection with the third offset strategy.
Just very quickly, for sake of time, allies and partners are going to be enormously important in almost everything we do. As we think about how we go to war, we always go with partners, and we do not see that changing in the future. Much of what we're doing is thinking about how we have the right kind of discussions so that they can contribute and help shape that future. And today, we're also looking at our allies and partners as partners, no kidding, in terms of the technology development itself and how we start to begin to engage early on in capturing their benefit as well. Let me give Will a second to respond on that.
I'll be very brief. It's very important in the near-term response and the offset to realize that we have two advantages that go back to more of the human side of the equation. One, we've been a preferred partner in the world, and a lot of our allies and partners use the same equipment that we currently train with. We train with them on a routine yearly basis. It's a huge part of our readiness posture. So as we start reimagining how we use our systems, there's a great potential to bring in allies and partners and have that cross-pollinate so that adversaries aren't just facing a U.S. adversary, but they're facing a whole coalition approach. Two is what you mentioned before. There's going to be commercial technology that's going to be cut into the mix alongside traditional military technology. Because it's commercially based, it will be much more readily available to work on with allies and partners. If we don't let exquisite requirements start pushing up what we try to get out of it from a military capability, cost is going to be a very important metric in the offset. It's not just red cost, it's going to be blue cost as well. What are we spending? What are they spending? And then what do we think the refresh rate of that technology will be? So if we're wise, we will try to find capabilities in the commercial world where we're getting good bang for the buck and keep an eye, is it something we can share with allies and partners? If we can, then our coalitions that we build up play for us and not against us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Prabhakar, I was going to comment if Senator Manchin had been here. I think probably the biggest distinction that you're dealing with between, say, the service academies and some of the other institutions is the nature of their research and investments that are being made by the federal government, and then private sector. They create a different group of people that I assume you're collaborating with. So I think I understand why there would be necessarily a different focus and different relationship with the service academies.
Just to comment on that, if you look at all academic institutions broadly, of course, there are many that focus on teaching and some that focus on research. And our natural partners for the research funding that we, especially the basic research work that we're doing, tend to be those research universities rather than those focused on education, which is more where the academies have been. And that doesn't preclude, there are in fact some very good things that we've done there. I just didn't want to leave the impression that that was a major focus for us.
Yeah, and I understood. And I think I understood it. I just wanted to make that point. And Dr. Roper, and really for anyone on the panel, when the chair talked about we're not really fighting tank to tank anymore, that's completely true. You know, our Air Force, our air capabilities will need to continue to evolve, and I think we can build and iterate on our offensive and defensive capabilities. And probably the same is true for the Navy, but for the people on the ground, like the folks I have at Fort Bragg and Camp Lejeune, they're being deployed in very different ways. And I think Dr. Welby talked a little bit about the way that we will equip them, the way that they and the equipment and materials they're using could be semi-autonomous, tethered or loosely tethered or untethered. I kind of understand how that would operate, but at the end of the day, it's because we're going to have a dispersed group of smaller units on the field. So the question then becomes many of your innovations are likely not to be these big shiny ships and new missile systems that are going to be deployed on the battlefield, but they're going to be things that are very much connected to the humans and in the environments that we find ourselves fighting now. So could you talk a little bit about that and also talk about the research that you're doing that has less to do with offensive and defensive capabilities, but just pure play force protection for the operators on the field?
Sure. Thanks, Senator Tillis. There's going to be some, I think, amazing things that we'll be able to do with ground forces given the commercial technology revolution that's going around us. So in our personal lives, we're all carrying around fairly sophisticated, high processing, low weight electronics that are massively networked and are completely enabled by cloud-based services. The military analog of this is obvious. If we can smartly find a way to transition this over and be able to do secure processing and not have cyber vulnerabilities be a bigger headache than they are the enabling capability from the technology themselves. We are working very closely this year with the Army and with SOCOM, some of the folks in your neck of the woods at Fort Bragg, on trying to find the balance between using commercial technology on the battlefront. I think there's a lot of promise there. One example that I'd like to highlight is work that we're doing with the Marine Corps on big data and analytics. So you can imagine that all of these distributed systems that are going to be spread out over the battlefield are going to be producing data. That data is going to be pulled in a disaggregated way, but eventually pulled centrally. Understanding it, being able to give commanders that leading edge of decision authority is going to be important. So the Marine Corps right now is doing experiments with us currently today in the Philippines at the Balakatan exercise, pulling in lots of information that supports that exercise and synthesizing it using commercially based big data tools. Something very new for us, and it's new for them, but taking advantage, as Secretary Welby mentioned, of experimentation and prototyping, especially when the core of the systems we're using are commercially based, is going to be a very prudent way for us to get out and get the human side of the technology alongside the technology side. So I see a lot of promise, but we're going to have to move into more of a rapid test it, modify it, retest it in order to stay on top.
Quickly, we often focus on those flashy pieces. We talk about tanks and missiles and aircraft. But just last week, the Secretary announced the new Manufacturing Innovation Institute for Revolutionary Fibers and Textiles, a major initiative that crosses 5 state initiatives that incorporates work going on around the country, thinking about fibers in a fundamentally different way, as an active component in fabrics that might have woven in electronics, might be able to serve not just as protective gear, but as part of an ensemble, an active part of an ensemble to support warfighters, a kit, and with enormous applications to first responders and to medical care and to enormous another set of capabilities. We're not just thinking about how robots and new weapons kind of enable this future, but also thinking about how we make the individual warfighter more effective. And I think there's a lot happening in that space, be it augmented reality kind of capabilities, be it soldier-borne compute, be it novel textiles and rethinking what a uniform means, thinking about how folks can be more effective, distributed for survivability, and then massing for effect, even if they don't actually come together, but to be able to mass their effects. I think there's real opportunities to rethink the future of land combat. We're encouraging the Army Marine Corps to help us think through that future in new ways.
Thank you.
May I just tag on to these excellent comments? The nature of ground conflict, of course, continues to change. And if you look at what's happening today and into the future, that environment is one in which we see, if you watch the Russians, if you watch what's happening on the ground with ISIL, you see this mix of kinetic effects, but of course also cyber effects. You see the use of the information domain, and that used to mean dropping pamphlets or saying things on the radio. Of course, now it's social media. You see a different kind of use of the electromagnetic spectrum and jamming that we've not seen before. And the integrated ability to bring all of that to bear is what our ground troops now will need to be able to deal with. And so a lot of our work is really thinking about how, for example, how do you enable a squad to not only survive in that environment, but actually exercise greater influence and have a larger footprint than it does today by leaping ahead of the kinds of things that are coming at us.
One last point, Senator. That goes back to what we've touched on several times. The military that will be able to push the most amount of trust to the edge, assuming the enabling technology is there, is likely to win. That's an area where we have a significant advantage.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tillis. Senator Kane, did you have other questions?
Just one. Can you explain that last point you just made?
It's an important point. So, I think we envision that.
And repeat it, about the edge, so repeat that point.
So as we push, where there's always a desire where you can to do things in a centralized fashion. I want to have all the data flowing to the brain in the center, and then the commands will push out to the edge. As we discussed today, we're living in a complicated world. We're going to face cyber, we're going to face spectrum denial, we're going to face information operations, as Dr. Prabhakar mentioned. All of that is going to contest various nodes in that network. Data is not going to flow the way we want it to. So the military that is able to have the most trust to interpret commanders' intent and the technology to allow them to back it up at the edge is going to have a significant advantage in the rapidity of their response. So if we can move and enable that, we have an advantage over militaries who can't. Well, when I go around and talk with our operators, which is my great privilege to do so, and I contrast that with what I see in the rest of the world, I think we have an advantage in the level of trust in our chain of command. And if we put the technology in the hands of soldiers that have our trust, then we're already a step ahead of the game. And a lot of the technologies that you've heard discussed today are about trying to flow that enabling capability out to the edge of conflict, to the edge of the battlefront.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Sorry, I was coming over from an Intelligence Committee meeting, but I know it's been an interesting hearing just based on the written testimony that was submitted. Secretary Welby, I want to talk about DCIGS-A. In your testimony, one of the areas you highlight are technologies and concepts that enable faster and better decision-making and coordinated operations at range and across the battle space. Do you think the department or the services should continue to develop major automated information systems?
Senator, I believe that major automated information systems, there are places where the department needs to be developing military unique capabilities that don't exist anywhere else. I think where the department is leveraging capabilities that are available from the commercial sector, we should not be in the business and should be leveraging commercial innovation to the greatest extent possible. We see this in areas such as electronic health records, where we've shifted our focus to leverage commercial to the greatest degree. We see it in some of our log systems where we had those kind of capabilities. I think we're seeing it increasingly in intelligence and data fusion systems where we can leverage commercial to a greater degree.
DCIGS-A has been developed since the late 1990s, and it's been beset by cost overruns and schedule delays. Do you think this is one of those areas where we should perhaps move to commercial or private sector solutions?
Senator, I'm not fully fluent in the Army's current approach to that. I know they are reconsidering their strategy in terms of that program.
Dr. Roper, do you have an opinion on this matter?
On the DCIGS-A as a whole, no, Senator. I will say that for the information tools that we're developing to leverage big data and analytics, we're relying heavily upon commercial tools, as well as those developed by our government DoD laboratories, as well as those developed by DARPA. I think developing architectures that enable as much of a rapid refresh of commercially based tools would be wise, given the pace of development in the world.
An 80 or 85% solution would be acceptable today?
It is for our operators, sir.
I think it was Patton, or maybe MacArthur, who said in something that was quoted in Infantry Field Manual 7-8 that a good plan today is better than a perfect plan tomorrow.
Yeah, to your point, Senator, the Marines who are using our tools right now, and I'm getting feedback from them each day, we've never had this ability to coordinate on the information front. So they're learning, they're writing the training manual as we go. So if we strive for exquisite solutions ahead of the operator's ability to use them to their fullest intent, we may have a 100% solution that's actually clocking at 80% on the battlefield. So we have to balance the technology leap as well as the operator leap.
Do you think it would make sense to develop a program that had 120 different apps?
It's appealing given how enabling that is for us in our personal lives. That's very similar to how the tool I referenced works. It's called an Information Common Operation Picture, or ICOP. And it does work based on an app-based approach where no one single piece of software developed, in most cases by small businesses, provides operators precisely what they want. So on the government side, we develop the integrating architecture and a display so that you can change out things behind the hood, but it looks the same way to operators on their screen. Now that's for one particular application, for looking at large amounts of publicly available information and making sense of it. How well those extrapolate to bigger architectures, including warfighting architectures, is a question I'm not able to comment on well.
Would it surprise you that the project manager found that of the 120 apps, commanders and soldiers used on average 5 of them?
I think it would, Senator.
And why is that?
Well, just seeing how many apps I use in my own life, we tend to find, if it's useful, we tend to apply them personally. So the reason for that is not one that I can comment on, but it does surprise me.
I mean, I'm sure if we put a video game and an ESPN app on there that soldiers would find a way to use those. But if it's just the mission in front of them, I have to say I'm not terribly surprised that they're going for the simple route, since that's usually the best way to success in the Army. I'm reminded of a story I heard once about Booker T. Washington when he was building his university. It may be apocryphal, but it's one of those stories that's too good to check because it has an important lesson. That he built the buildings, everything was ready to go, students were ready to report, and someone pointed out to him they didn't have sidewalks. And they said, "Are you going to build the sidewalks?" And he said, "One day I might." And about 6 weeks in, he took the engineers and the designers out and pointed out where all the grass was dead and said, "Build the sidewalks there," rather than trying to force the students and the faculty to walk on sidewalks where he thought they should be designed and placed. I think that probably could carry a good lesson for when we're designing this kind of system. Thank you all for your testimony, and thank you for your answers to these questions. They're a very important matter, and I'm sure the committee is going to be taking it up.
Thank you, Senator Cotton. I'd like to once again thank the panel. This was a fascinating discussion. I thank you for your work. It's important work. As I said earlier, we've always given you good support with this committee because of the support that you give our warfighters. Thank you. We are adjourned.